Hearing his thick stride behind us, I followed Glimmer through the train. 3 carriages later, we heard the griffins landing behind us, obscured still in the smoke of their own grenades, screeching and shouting when they found no corpses. I heard their talons making a rampaging charge across the tin floors. "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit," Glimmerlight was muttering to herself as we limped and pulled one another as fast as 2 tired ponies could. I ceased to hear Brimstone behind me. Had he stopped? My legs felt like dead weight, exhausted beyond compare. Stumbling over the wreckage, we were only moving 1 carriage for every 3 the griffins were bounding through to catch up. I didn't want to look back. All I might see would be those razor-sharp claws waiting to rip me apart. Memories of outrunning the Thresher began to re-emerge, prompting mewling, whinnying. We couldn't leave the train. If we did, we'd be gunned down. It was a simple race to... Contact spotted ahead. 2 slaves.
Engage and eliminate.
Against all my fear, my head turned. 2 griffins, a male and a female, black and white, were launching between chairs and leaping over wreckage through the carriage behind us, equipped for close quarters. Both had knives drawn, one with a pistol in his offhand. Where was... Brimstone Blitz exploded from behind the door. Having purposefully stopped to wait for them, his full titanic weight bore down on the 2 griffins from the side. Frenzied, I saw him actually bite the arm carrying the pistol, snapping and snarling enough to draw blood and make the griffin drop his firearm. Screeching at a pitch that dizzied me, the griffin spun, raking the knife at Brimstone. Normally, griffins were considered bigger and stronger than a pony, but even they seemed small compared to Brimstone in such tight quarters. Tearing a chunk of flesh away with his teeth, he roared with bloodlust. 1 mighty hoof slapping away the knife at his forehead collided with the griffin's own. A sharp thunk barely registered before he stamped down hard with a front hoof on his stunned opponent's hind leg. Legs were not supposed to bend that way. The griffin squealed, falling to the ground. Caught unaware, the female griffin whirled to face the unexpected foe, only to find her companion hurled into her hard enough to drop them both into a seat. Brimstone reared up, dropping both hooves down on the pair hard enough to snap ribs on the male and wind the female beneath him. Using the time, I saw him go for the knife with his mouth, a mad glint in his eye, and... I felt Glimmerlight pull my head away as he lunged. The screaming started. Even holding my ears covered, I could still hear it, like ripping cloth apart, accompanied by long wailing cries that finally stopped after far too long a time. Hidden by the chairs that obscured the corpses, I could still see the draining blood and dirtied feathers dropping to the floor and slowly spreading. With a sudden jolt, his smeared face turned to us.
"Why are you still here?"
We didn't need any encouragement. Turning, we galloped as fast as we could, little more than a determined canter. Both our heads were drooping, and I could see Glimmer's legs beginning to wobble under her. I could feel my lungs having to work almost as hard as my limbs to get air. Hopping off the train, we found ourselves in the warehouse shop floor. Chains and hooks surrounded us, all of them hanging from giant ceiling-borne cranes. Already I could hear griffins on the roof trying to shout to their comrades. Single shots whipped into the hard ground as skylights smashed and dropped razor edges either side of us. Glimmer galloped into the group of offices nearby to the edge of the yard, spurring herself to dive into and through the open doors, even as the ground was chewed up behind her. I was still 20 feet out, and way too far to... A griffin landed atop a train beside me, the short-barreled weapon pointed directly at me. Acting before thinking, I ducked and rolled under the train, only realizing why this was a horrible idea as I felt my bandages yank and tear. I clutched at my shoulder and screamed at both the sucking wound's pain and the clatter of fully automatic fire mere feet above me. Clawing, pulling, and struggling, I pushed myself to keep crawling under the train towards the offices Glimmer had moved to. The train only moved parallel to the doorway, though. I'd have to leave and make a run for it sometime, but I couldn't run! I had to try. 3 legs only. It looked silly, but I'd had to keep going. Drawing my head out from under the train, I saw the griffin stalking along the top of it, head lowered. She hadn't spotted me yet, and... Yes, she had! Her head jerked around, the barrel following even as I begged her not to shoot. "Please! I'll come back! I'll go back to my master!" Too late, Pipsqueak. Stern says you die, you die. Her talon clenched on the trigger until the entire train lurched, shaking the griffin's balance until it threw her off and sent a shot wildly into the air. Swearing colorfully, she twisted in the air and landed on her hind legs directly atop me, one hind leg snapping down on my neck, pushing me into the concrete. My squeal of agony from my shoulder being under my body drowned out into a rasping sound as her weight pressed down onto my weak lungs. Her weapon was pointed around, before spraying through the train itself. Why? What was she? A 2-foot-wide train wheel hurtled in from over the carriage like a child's throwing disc, slamming directly into her chest and pinning the mercenary to the ground. A crisp snap told of broken ribs. Following it, Brimstone Blitz launched himself through the middle of the carriage's cargo doors and bounded over to the fallen griffin. Stamping on the gun, bending the barrel, he barely even hesitated before another ferocious stamp cracked her skull off the ground. If she had remained that way, she may have lived. But groaning in pain only attracted the grim raider's attention, leading him to stamp again and again, over and over, until her groaning stopped. Pulling myself up, I felt him bend over and pull out one of the last small healing potions we had liberated from slaver corpses, before carefully dragging me towards where Glimmer hid. Already I could hear other griffins taking to the air to close in on the screams. The moment Brimstone got us behind the doorway, he closed it, throwing cabinets and desks against it like playthings until he had bought us at least a little time with the makeshift blockade. My shoulder was stinging as the healing potion took effect, the bleeding coagulating again into a thick, hardened mass. The potion wouldn't get rid of it, but it would stop me bleeding out a while longer and let me walk. Skittering on the slick concrete floor, I cast a glance around. We needed a hiding spot. This was my area of things. Rooms. Too obvious and natural. Vents. Glimmer and Brim wouldn't fit. Storage cupboards. Only one way out. Damn! The entire building was big enough to survive a nearby balefire detonation, but held no safe rooms? I pathetically bucked a small sign on the wall in frustration before tripping over my own hooves. What idiot designed this place to not have any safe rooms in a major industrial city? Murky? What's wrong? Glimmer glanced sideways at me. I'm trying to find an underground bomb shelter, I ranted, staggering in a small circle. It'd be the best place to hide in. I used to get crammed in one back in Manhattan, so I know big wartime buildings have them, and they always have an exit in case the building came down. We can hide in it and escape to the outside. But no pony left any stupid directions. That way? Glimmerlight pointed a hoof towards some side offices. Wait. How? But what? I knew why. I see. You're a Steel Ranger. You know all about pre-war buildings. Actually, I just read the sign you kicked. Despite her exhaustion, she managed a thin smile. Turning, I saw the green and white sign filled with indecipherable words, still legible amongst the seared interior. Not for the first time in my life, I sighed and lowered my head. Illiteracy wasn't fun. Without Glimmer, I'd likely be running around in circles trying to find it. Hey, Murky. Positive thoughts now. Big nasty griffin's about to drop in. Let's go! I heard Brimstone batter down the door into the offices, revealing the easy-access safe room slope at the far end, where a huge steel door lay open. My stomach clenched when I saw multiple charred skeletons nearby to it, where they had just pulled it open before the fires had surged through the blackened building. My hooves crunched in the ash of light furniture and papers. All that seemed left was the bare structure of what bones survived. They had been so close. Behind us I heard the surging of wings and wisps of air as griffins leapt in from the skylights. They were accompanied by a thumping as other slavers tried to batter down at the door Brimstone had blocked. They had us surrounded.
Get in!
Brimstone arrived, grabbed my jerkin, and virtually hurled me down the stairs. Painfully bouncing and rolling, I barely managed to get back to my feet and glance back up to see Glimmer jump over the ledge and into the dark stairwell. Brimstone glanced back, before snorting and pushing the door closed. From the outside. Her own hooves moving quickly, Glimmerlight tried to stop him, pushing futilely against his strength. "Wait! What are you doing? Get in here, Brim!" The old raider didn't even stop scraping his hooves through the ash as the great door began to slide shut. Tangentially, it occurred to me that if those ponies 200 years ago hadn't gotten it open for us, we'd have been caught with how long it took even him to move it.
Those feather-brained bambots are going to surround the place. They'll be happy to wait. They know slaves are in here. They need a lure, something to get them off your tails while you rest.
Almost all sound seemed to deaden as the ramifications of his plan started to weigh upon my mind. I found myself galloping back up the stairs to beside Glimmerlight. Words just wouldn't come to me. Her mouth was just open, shaking her head. "Look, we'll find a way. You don't need to do this!" Brimstone Blitz looked back at us, gore dripping still from his muzzle, and bloodshot eyes quivering with the adrenaline of battle. Then he smiled.
Won't happen. Griffins are patient. More than I am. Besides, I put slaves into this trade all my life. Killed ponies and just so much else.
I felt my eyes well up. This was too rushed. I didn't have time to prepare anything to say or how to react. My tears were not alone. Glimmerlight pressed her hoof against his chest. "Now you want to save at least some." "Well," she narrowed her eyes, "you come back. I am not accepting that the great warlord you've rumbled on in my ear so much about is going to be beaten by a bunch of flying chickens. On my way here I saw an old bank outside Philadelphia's main centers. You know it?" Brimstone merely nodded. "Then we'll meet there." She stepped back. I saw Brimstone's gaze turn to me. Not expecting it, I racked my brain for what to say, but hearing hooves and talons clatter closer, I just shook my head. Theirs was a story I shared, the raider and the runaway. But this was his moment to shine. Only 2 words really came from my mouth as I trotted forwards to hop up and lay my head against the side of his shoulder. "Thank you." I knew I was crying. For once, the pony locking me away was doing it to save me.
Goddesses be with ye both.
Brimstone rumbled the words, his hoof briefly arching around to hold me, before gently pressing me back towards Glimmerlight.
Gallop safely. We'll meet again.
With that, the light died as Brimstone slammed the great door shut. His great stride sounded immediately, galloping away into the building. He had told me that he was always a raider, that there was no way to appear as anything else. But right now I could not help but feel inspired by his determination to protect the ponies who he felt deserved it. He may not agree, but in that moment he was as far from the raider as I could ever believe. Glimmerlight and I stayed on the staircase for some time, listening to the gunfire, screams, and blood-curdling war cries mixed with dull impacts and tearing metal. Gradually they moved further and further away, before eventually ceasing completely. By then I felt Glimmerlight holding me tightly against her with one hoof. He got away. They didn't get him. "How do you know?" "Not anywhere near enough gunfire to bring that big lout down. Besides, he still owes me 10 caps and a beer." Her smile in my pitbuck's pale light seemed small as she turned and led me down into the emergency lights of the safe room. Remaining for just a second with one hoof pressed against the door, I could not begin to fully grasp the emotion. What was it? Sadness? Loss? Some pony had just thrown themselves into the grinder for me, and amidst my torn mindset, I just didn't know what to feel.